Good evening. Welcome to the Development Management Committee. I'm Councillor Kieran Balker, the Chair of the committee. Before we start the meeting, I need to make the public attending aware of the following. We're not expecting a fire drill, so if the fire alarm goes off, please make your way out of the nearest emergency exit and gather at the front of Mead Hall. Meetings of the committee are live streamed on our YouTube page on the internet. If you're seated in the public area of the council chamber, it's possible that your image will become part of the broadcast. And lastly, may I ask all present to switch mobile phones to silent? Thank you very much. May I ask the Development Management Committee members who are present in the chamber, in the row in front of me, to introduce themselves, stating your name only and starting on my left.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Jamie Huntsman.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Grace Watson.
Thank you, Chair. Evening all. Councillor Carol Sage.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Michael Fuller.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Diana Jones.
Good evening all. Councillor Rob Lillis.
Good evening, Councillor Gareth Howlett.
Good evening, everyone. Councillor Russ Savage.
Good evening all. Councillor Matt Cortez.
Thank you, members. May I ask the officers present to introduce themselves, again starting on my left.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm Mitchell Gitz. I'm the Planning Manager.
Keith Zammit, Senior Planning Officer.
David Batchelor, Senior Planning Officer.
Good evening. Stephen Garner, Assistant Director for Development Services.
Good evening. Sonia Worthington, Democratic Services Manager.
Loretta Hill, Civic and Democratic Services Officer.
Good evening. David Bland, Legal Advisor to the committee.
Amy Mead, Democratic Services Apprentice.
Thank you very much. And may I ask any other members present to introduce themselves?
Good evening, Councillor Laurie Dixon.
Good evening, Councillor Sharon Ainsley.
Good evening, Councillor Michael Dearson, Tarbots Ward.
Thank you very much. There are no apologies for absence. Item 2 is members' interests. Members, are there any interests to declare? No? Good. Item 3, minutes. Are the minutes for the Development Management Committee held on the 11th of March agreed? Agreed. Item 4 is land south and southeast of Maryvale, Catherine Road, Benfleet. Members, we have an application for the demolition of existing stable buildings and the construction of 9 new dwellings. I'll now ask the Planning Officer to present this item.
Good evening, Chair, committee members and members of the public. This presentation regards the proposed development at the site known as land south and southeast of Maryvale, Catherine Road, Benfleet, reference 24/0785/FUL. The development is for demolition of existing stable buildings and construction of 9 new dwellings. The officer recommendation is for refusal. The committee report summarises the site, proposal, relevant policies, consultation and assessment of the proposal. Technical reports and consultee comments have been received and they provide further detail. As the report and these documents are publicly online and have been circulated, these documents will be assumed as read by all those in the room and the detail of these documents will not be repeated. A site visit was conducted on Friday the 4th of April and now the following matters will address the substantive matters for consideration. The site comprises an approximately 0.5521 hectare land parcel between Cale Road and Catherine Road. It is within land identified as Land Parcel 3B under the Castle Point Borough Green Belt Review 2018 Part 1 document. This land parcel is identified as having character with a moderate influence over unrestricted sprawl of large built-up areas, a very strong prevention of neighbouring towns merging into one another, and a minor assistance in safeguarding the countryside from harm. As such, it is deemed entirely within the green belt. 3 vacant stable buildings are in the centre of the site. These are marked in red on the slide. As we can see on the slide, and as we experienced during the site visit, vegetation has grown into the foundations of these buildings. The buildings are also somewhat open. In accordance with the NPPF direction, the previously developed footprint of the site is limited to the foundations of these buildings. The site is also subject to a tree protection order, also known as a TPO, reference 44/2018. This covers the entire site and is described as an area of trees comprising mainly ash, alder, hawthorn, oak and willow. The tree and vegetation cover connects with mature vegetation to the east, west and north of the site. An open area of former grazing field is in the eastern part of the site. The proposal seeks the removal of the existing stable buildings and trees in the centre of the property, retaining vegetation on the boundaries of the property and a cluster of trees near the eastern boundary. The proposed development would construct a 4-metre wide vehicle crossing on Cale Road and a 4.3 metre wide passage intended for shared use by vehicles, cyclists and pedestrians. This passage would extend 20 metres into the site into a 6-metre wide circulation area. 2 internal lanes measuring 2.8 and 4.3 metres wide each would extend east and west from the circulation area. Nine dwellings would be built on the site. Each dwelling would be a single storey and contain either 2 bedrooms for 4 people or 3 bedrooms for 6 people. Water butts, bird boxes and insect boxes would be installed on each plot. Each unit would have 2 vehicle car parking spaces with electric charging spaces, infrastructure and dedicated space for 2 cycle parks and 1 refuse bin. The landscaping plan identifies the replanting of existing hawthorn, hazel and elder trees around the site boundary. It also identified planting new hedges around the plot boundaries. No other landscaping information is provided. The buildings would have flat roofs with green planting. They would be clad in timber and be rendered. The units would have large internal living spaces and outdoor living spaces. Internally, they would exceed the minimum gross floor internal area requirements. Units 3, 4, 6 and 7 would have north-facing outdoor living areas, while the other units have east and west-facing outdoor living areas. All units are to be sold at market rate. No affordable housing is proposed. The committee report identifies 48 public objections and objections from place services regarding ecology, as well as objections from Essex Highways and the Essex Badger Protection Group. Essex Police have recommended design alterations. The evaluation of the proposal in the committee report draws the committee's attention to the direction of the NPPF regarding development of greenbelt land. This direction states that development on the greenbelt is unacceptable except under certain exceptions and under very special circumstances. These exceptions include developing previously developed land, meeting the golden rules that require 50% affordable housing, and providing new or improvements to existing public green space, among other matters. It also draws the committee's attention to the relevant policies regarding design, residential amenity, mix of developments, intensification of access use, and the residential design guidance. Now, at the site visit, there was a question about roosting bats. The applicant's ecology report states that no roosting bats were recorded at the time of the survey. However, the ecology report identifies that the proposed development could disturb bats in the trees at the time of works if they become present or known. Neighbour objections include statements that they have video evidence of bats on the property. However, this has not been seen by the council. Place Services identified that it would expect a review of the suitability of trees regarding roosting bats, but this review has not been provided. Place Services also note that a precautionary working method statement or compensation strategy could be a mitigation method, including a requirement for a European Protected Species Mitigation Licence from Natural England prior to any works identified on trees with roosts. Now I'll pass the item to the Chair and the members. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Michael Dixon, Ward Member for Tarpot, would you like to speak on this item? Councillor Dixon, please take your place at the microphone. Dearson. I did say Dearson. I thought I did. You have 3 minutes, and if you start getting close to that, I'll give you a head. Yes,
Please,
and ask you to sum up. Thank you very much.
I am here today as a councillor to speak on behalf of the concerned residents of Tarpots and Appleton Ward. In fact, all residents in our borough are my pledge when elected to support them in protection of our green belt and our open spaces. I would like to commend the officers on their detailed report, along with numerous submissions and from various organisations, all highlighting why this application should be refused. I repeat, should be refused. I would like to thank them for agreeing with my many concerns raised by my residents. In fact, having read all the information relating to this application, I'm amazed that the applicant has applied for planning permission when it clearly is inappropriate for the development being considered tonight. This site does not meet the criteria in the National Planning Policy Framework to be classed as previously developed land. The developer seeks to construct dwellings over most of the site, whereas the only central section has ever been occupied by a permanent structure, some stables, for horses, not residential structures. So, in effect, and to remove doubt, this site is wholly brownfield, as defined in the NPPF. It does not entirely comprise of previously developed land. The site does not satisfy grey belt definition and is clearly defined as green belt, as highlighted in the officer's report. 48 of my residents have lodged their objection to this application based on the following: concerns of wildlife, protected trees that will be harmed from the development, reduction in privacy to residents, inappropriate development of greenbelt, unacceptable increase in traffic in the area, no affordable housing, I repeat, no affordable housing, an overall and inadequate solution for parking for the proposed development. I also want to reiterate the comments from Essex Highways: substandard vehicle access, unacceptable degree of hazard to road users to the detriment of the highway safety, does not meet the required parking standards. So in closing, I appreciate the members of DNC will weigh all the evidence to reach their decision. I would like to remind them there is overwhelming evidence from the officers, consultees and residents that would suggest refusal is the correct outcome for this application. I hope you will come to the same conclusion and support my residents. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Dearson. Do members have any questions for the planning officer about the planning application? Please note this is members' opportunity to seek clarification from the planning officer on any matters they are unclear of regarding the application. Members should refrain from making statements about their views on the proposal. They should be expressed in the debate section. Who would like to speak first? Councillor Lillis.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just for some historical background, David, can you confirm whether the site was allocated for development in the previous administration's local plan? Thank you.
I appreciate you asked David, but I'll answer that one because he's new to the authority. But yes, in the withdrawn plan, it was previously allocated as part of a larger site for development.
Councillor Howlett.
Could you just confirm that there's no parking for visitors to the site?
No visitor parking has been identified on the submitted plans.
Councillor Lillis.
Yeah, thank you once again, Chair. David or Steve, you mentioned the so-called golden rules earlier on. Can you just confirm that a 50% affordable housing provision would be required on this site, and yet 0% is being proposed? Thank you.
That is correct.
Are there any other questions for the officers? Members, the planning officer's recommendation is that planning permission be refused for the 6 reasons set out at paragraph 1.1 of the report. For the purposes of debate, I move the recommendation. Councillor Huntman, as Vice Chairman, will you second the motion?
I second that, Chairman, yes.
Thank you. Please note that members should only speak once during the debate section of the meeting. Who would like to speak? Councillor Huntman.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I went on this site visit, very interesting. And you know, personally, look, I'm not against development if appropriate, and I'm well aware of the government targets that we've got to meet, and there's going to be some very difficult decisions that we've all got to make. And speaking of said government, I don't agree with them on many things, but what I do think is that this golden rule of 50% affordable housing seems to be sensible in certain areas, as opposed to executive or market rate housing. For context, when I was a young man some time ago, I had to find 3 times my salary to get on the housing ladder, which I managed to do. And shockingly nowadays, for a young person, it's something like 8 times their salary, which is absolutely ridiculous. And I think we've got to, it's beholden on us to try and help local families, local young people, and give them a step up. And with this in mind, although I'm not going to vote in favour of the present application as it stands, I think, having seen this type of site, if it was put forward with the relevant affordable housing that the government have said in the golden rules, that this would be something that maybe we could look at again, and that's my view.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Fuller.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, I've sat on many planning committees in my time as a councillor, and when we're presented with the report to read, and I must say I congratulate the case officer for the quality of the report, the depth and the information contained within it. When we're presented with these reports, it's incumbent on us to do a balance, weighing up the pros and the cons, the advantages, the disadvantages. This is the first time I think I've ever been presented with a report where I can find no merit at all in the application. It seems rather like the Grand National, really. We're talking about stables. There's a horse running here, which is a development, and it's fallen all 6 fences. I have no doubt whatsoever in my mind that I will be voting for this to be refused. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Jones. You don't wish to speak. Councillor Lillis.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, my thanks to David for the very comprehensive report and briefing this evening, and for arranging the the site visit on Friday. For those that are present or watching, site visits operate under a very strict protocol, but they give members a chance to get a feel for the site. Thanks to my colleague, Councillor Michael Dearson, for his contributions this evening. I think it's fair to say that he is a true residents' champion. And I would also like to acknowledge the 48 objections that he referred to this evening that were received. Chair, the officer's report clearly states that the proposed development would harm the open character and attractiveness of the site and the surrounding area. And having walked around that site last week, I found it to be very open, as my colleagues would have done so as well, and agree that this would be significantly reduced if the application is permitted. I also fully agree with the officer that there are no special circumstances that exist to justify the proposed development in the Greenbelt, and as such, it is contrary to what is set out in the NPPF. So arguably that would be enough to refuse the application, but there is much more. I'll try not to repeat too much of what has already been said, but the fact that there is no provision of affordable housing, as the Cabinet Member for Health, Wellbeing and Housing, I find that very disappointing, I have to say. There is no RAMS mitigation offered. The site, as has been mentioned, is subject to a TPO with ash, elder, hawthorn, willow and oak trees, all of which we would have encountered as we walked the site. Access to the site will be tight, to say the least, and has already been mentioned there is a lack of parking provision. Chair, you will know that I'm often at odds with highways when I'm sitting on this committee, so tonight is a rarity for me. I find myself agreeing with them, and that possibly is a first. And from their perspective, the impact of the proposal is not acceptable, and we should know, I think has already been referred to by one of my colleagues, they talk in terms of and I quote, unacceptable degree of hazard, unquote. And elsewhere in the report, it refers to aspects of the development as being unsafe. Place services have stated that they're not satisfied that sufficient information has been provided regarding the impact on European protected species. And the Essex Badger Protection Group, who do a lot of great work in our borough and elsewhere, they object to the proposal, and as is customary, they remind us that badgers are protected by UK law. And finally, I saw reference in the report, I'm not sure whether it's in the application or the report itself, that the applicant considers the site to be mainly brownfield or PDL, which is previously developed land. Well, having walked around that site on Friday with my colleagues and gone into the undergrowth and everything else, I very much beg to differ. For what I saw, the old stables and buildings there occupied a fraction of the site. I think that's pretty clear from the images that was put up on the screen. So for those reasons, and no doubt more, I'll be very much supporting the officer's recommendation and voting against the application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Savage.
Well, thanks to Councillor Lillis, he's basically summed up just about everything I was going to say. However, I would add one other thing. I think in the years that I've sat on this committee, I don't think I've ever seen Essex Highways do anything other than say, no comment. And yet we've got three kind of relevant points in there. And I think, to me, I feel like I'm having my intelligence insulted with 3.16 on here when the developer says, we're going to put some water butts and bird boxes in. I just feel like I'm having my intelligence insulted. So I certainly will not be approving this application.
Agreed. Thank you. Councillor Cortez.
Thank you, Chair. Most of my points have already been made. The only thing that I would say is, if we did look at accepting it, you could have any plot developed that's down a little lane, because the access down Cow Road just quite simply wouldn't be fair on the residents. It wouldn't be fair on the residents of the road that Cow's off of, because there quite simply isn't any access to get to the site. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Members, would anyone else like to speak? Okay, members, the motion before you is to agree that planning permission is refused. May I have a show of hands, please? Those for the motion. And that is unanimous, and planning permission is refused. Onwards, item 5. Acres Way, Great Burches Road, Thundersley. Members, we have an application for the demolition of an existing dwelling house, kennels and associated outbuildings, and the erection of 10 dwellings and associated amenity space. I will now ask the planning officer to present this item. Thank you.
Thank you and good evening. Right. Acres Way. It's a site that's within the green belt. Here we are. It's a site within the green belt with a dwelling house on it and buildings used as boarding kennels, which members who were at the site on Friday will recall. It has equestrian and residential uses to the south of it and open lands to the north. Here is the site which we visited, which you remember the long driveway which leads down to it here. And then here's the car parking area where many of us gathered on Friday. The existing buildings on the site are shown in one or two example photos. There was the sort of dwelling house that had roof accommodation, single-storey buildings around the car park, single-storey structures used for kennels, and more rough areas of the site that had grass on and some where the willow trees were here. Right, that's the existing layout with the entrance being here. And the proposal is to redevelop the site with 10 houses, arranged 5 either side of this cul-de-sac. Here are some examples of the type of dwellings that are proposed. Some of these are in keeping with the local vernacular. Others are not, but this is not visually inappropriate given that a new residential street with its own character would be created if the development was approved. Let's go back to the site plan. In principle, you can redevelop an already developed site with housing in the green belt, but this proposal spreads development out over a wider area of the site, as well as replacing what are mostly single-storey buildings with two-storey buildings. So it has a greater effect on the openness of the green belt. The proposal is not an appropriate redevelopment of previously developed land. The site is not grey belt because there is an unmitigated recreational disturbance impact on wildlife habitat sites. But even if the applicant mitigated this harm so that the site was grey belt, the development doesn't follow the government's new golden rules for greenbelt development. First and foremost, because it makes no offer of affordable housing. It should be 50% affordable housing according to golden rules. It's therefore inappropriate development in the greenbelt for which very special circumstances must be demonstrated. Officers do not consider that there are any such circumstances, so the application should be refused. As well as the greenbelt harm, officers consider that access to the site is not suitable for this quantum of residential development, and the applicant has not shown that there are no great crested newts and bats on the site that would be adversely impacted by the proposal. Overall, the proposal is not a form of development that we as officers can support, and the recommendation put to members is therefore one of refusal.
Thank you, Keith. Members, the applicant, and I hope I'm pronouncing this right, Mr. Kivotos, would like to speak in support of the application. Mr. Kivotos, would you like to take your place at the microphone? You have approximately 3 minutes, and if you get near to that, I'll just ask you to sum up. Thank you.
Hello, good evening, everyone. Thanks for your time. I would like to say that this application was prepared last year as a pre-app, and we had a good pre-application meeting with Keith and the development manager. So we were prepared. We submitted an application in December 2004 before the government changed the rules in terms of greenbelt sites with special dispensation or uses. So we weren't prepared to make an offer with affordable housing. And I think we have had communication, and I appreciate the very candid communication we've had with the planning department. So we were preparing to offer affordable housing as part of the remit. That doesn't appear in this application. So I can understand the members' concern over that point. There are some other points I'd just like to make clear. So the site has been in family ownership for generations. It's not a developer-led project. Previous use on the site before kennels was as light industrial, and that occupies quite a large area. The kennels could be relocated to a site which is better suited and can allow growth of this business in the future. And the traffic movements, the frequency of the proposal in terms of numbers are very similar to the current frequency for the kennels itself. The proposal will provide 10 modern dwellings exceeding current building regulations for energy efficiency using renewable technology. So we're trying to approach that in that regard. The proposal will provide sustainable drainage solution, off-main sustainable sewage treatment plant, and therefore no impact on the current infrastructure. The proposal does provide a biodiversity offset area in addition to generous garden areas. And we have provided more than adequate parking and EV charging points. And the landscape has been considered, albeit that there is probably more information required, as Keith pointed out, in terms of the ecology, which we were hoping to deal with at condition level. And as you've seen, there is a variation to house designs to suit the local vernacular. And I would like to just point out one other thing. There are very similar neighbouring developments which have been allowed. The Brackens, which is 13 dwellings just down the road, and right adjacent to the site as you enter, a development called Hollywood Mews. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Gavotas. Could you return to your seat? Thank you very much. Members, do you have any questions for the planning officer about the application? Please note that statements should be reserved for the debate section of the meeting. Councillor Lillis.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's quite a long question, but I will get to it perhaps at the end. Keith, paragraph 8.12, which I've got as Castle Point Borough Council Legal Services. There's a paragraph there, and I'm quoting it, hopefully correctly. It says, the submitted unilateral undertaking would be unenforceable as part of the application site appears not to have a registered owner. And then similarly, 9.48, ecology, recreational disturbance mitigation, states that whilst the developer has offered a unilateral undertaking to pay a RAMS contribution, this is not legally enforceable. That terminology isn't something that I've seen at DMC. So perhaps in layman's terms, you could explain a little bit about what's going on there, please. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for the question. It's the ownership titles are quite fragmented on this land, and there was a sliver of land that had no registered owner forming a part of the application site. I mean, this does happen. It's not too unusual. When we want to enter into any sort of agreement with an applicant, they have to show title to the land in order to demonstrate that the person giving the undertaking or entering it into the agreement would be able to deliver on it. Because the applicant hasn't hitherto shown title to the land, it wouldn't be an enforceable undertaking. If that was the only thing that was wrong with the application, we would be going back to the applicant and saying, can you either go to land registry and get the land registered in your name, or can you sort that paperwork out? And because I'm recommending refusal, it doesn't really warrant further sort of debate and resources put into it at this stage. In the event that a proposal that's otherwise acceptable comes back to us, then yes, we would have to iron out that paperwork before we could sort of present it favourably to you.
Councillor Fuller.
Thank you, Chairman. Can I just ask, Keith, if you could be just for clarity, the application for which we are asked to approve or refuse tonight, the application that's before us has no affordable housing presented. Is that correct?
Yes, that's right. The development is for housing for sale on the open market.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Councillor Cortez.
Thank you, Chair. Just a small point of clarity. Are we saying that the lane going from Great Burches down to the estate is going to be, did I read, it's going to be a single width, but with a three passing spaces?
Yes, that is correct. It's difficult to demonstrate with this scale of drawing, but yeah, that's right.
Because that will be quite tight, I believe, for the types of property that are there. That doesn't seem anywhere near big enough.
I agree.
Are there any other questions, members? Members, the planning officer's recommendation is that planning be refused for the 4 reasons set out paragraph 1.1 of the reports. For the purposes of debate, I move the recommendation. Councillor Huntman, as Vice Chairman, will you second the motion?
I second that, Chairman.
Thank you very much. And in the debate section, please note you should only speak once. Who would like to speak first? Councillor Savage.
Just a point of clarity, really. The chap who spoke previously mentioned Acres Way and the houses on the slip road to this that were approved by this council. They were not approved by this council. They were approved by the former Conservative council, and they were actually member overturns. Both of those applications were offered for refusal. So just so you're aware.
Thank you, Councillor. Would anyone else like to speak? Councillor Huntman.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I noticed this application is for 10, obviously, executive homes, expensive. I mean, there's no shortage of executive homes for sale locally, and at the risk of repeating myself, it would, on affordable housing, I'm in favour of these golden rules of 50% to help local people here, and it was good to hear from the applicant that that was something that they may be considering, and in light of that, and this site I do know particularly well. In light of that, if there was 50% affordable housing, this is something that I'd be prepared to look at again in the future.
Councillor Howlett.
Yeah, just a quick point, really. My parents nearly bought this property back in the 80s off of a family friend. So as far as I'm aware, previously there was never no light industrial use on this property. It was a family home.
Would anyone else like to speak? Members, the motion before you is to agree that planning permission is refused. May I have a show of hands, please? Those for the motion. And that is unanimous even. Planning permission is refused. Item 6. Members, we have an application for the construction of a single-storey rear extension. I'll now ask the planning officer to present this item.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, members. For clarity, it's in front of you this evening because the applicant is an employee of this council. So the application is for the construction of a single-storey rear extension at 48 Paarl Road, Canvey Island. The proposed height, width and depth of the extension would be proportionate in scale to the host dwelling and its wider setting. The proposed external facing treatments would unite the proposal with the existing dwelling, such that the remodelled dwelling would not adversely detract from the character and appearance of the area. Officers recognise there's a slight erosion of outdoor amenity space whereby the proposal falls below the space standard contained in the residential design guide. However, this is felt to be proportionate to the scale and type of the proposal, where strict adherence to the guidance should be balanced against the desire for people to optimise their dwellings. The extension would retain some 1.2 metre side isolation space with its neighbour at number 50 Paarl Road. The proposal will extend to the shared boundary with number 46, and there's an intervening fence at this boundary. Therefore, only a small amount of the roof and the side wall of the proposal would appear above it. Therefore, the rear extension is felt to be a modest addition that, because of its relatively low height, would not cause excessive dominance to any neighbouring property. Moreover, officers are satisfied that they would not result in a material loss of daylight or sunlight penetrating to the neighbouring dwellings. No overshadowing to the rear windows of neighbours would occur, neighbouring dwellings I should say would occur, due to the scale of the proposal and the fact the gardens of the host dwelling and its neighbours are orientated northwards. Accordingly, there will be no conflict with the relevant national and local plan policies that collectively seek to ensure development proposals complement the character of the area and that of its scale, height and massing should be appropriate to the setting of the site, and that house extensions are subordinate to and do not dominate the character and appearance of the original dwelling. Despite the minor erosion of the garden space, the proposal would also generally accord with the design guidance contained in the residential design guide. Therefore, the application is recommended for approval subject to the suite of conditions attached in the report. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Do members have any questions for the planning officer? No questions as opposed to statements. Councillor Savage.
In the interest of openness, when we talk about other developers, I mean, obviously this is an employee of the council. Have we had any objections to this development?
We have indeed, yes. 46 next door, I think due to proximity of the extension. Sorry, if you look, I'm going to have to stand up on it. Thank you, Keith. Yeah, so looking out at 46, if they were looking out their back window, they'd see the top part of the new extension.
So sorry, just for I didn't visit this site. I visited the other two sites on that day. Sorry, Chair.
No problem.
Yeah, just so in terms of orientation, the back garden, what way is that facing?
North.
It's facing north.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Councillor Lillis.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Again, in the interest of transparency, more than anything, Mitch, can you just confirm that the only reason that this application is before us this evening is because the applicant is an employee of the council, and if he or she wasn't, this would have been approved under your own delegated authority?
That's correct, yes.
Are there any other questions? Councillor Lillis.
Thanks, Chair. Just one thing. You'll know it's a bit of a bugbear with me. I note under the conditions that our hours of work, the standard clause with regards to hours of work, isn't listed there. Bearing in mind this is a council employee, I'd hate to have too much bad press. So can we add that clause, please?
We can. I've got no issue with that. I would suggest it's already covered under the Environmental Protection Act. Out of hours noisy works are covered in that act as a primary legislation. I would advise against putting that in a condition. However, if you think it's relevant, we can certainly put it in. So,
obviously, in previous applications, we've had it there. So is that recent legislation?
No, you're probably aware the imposition of conditions are subject to 6 tests, one of those being necessity. If something is already covered by primary legislation, i.e. this case, out of hours noisy works, is enshrined in the environmental protection legislation, you're not adding any extra protection by making a planning condition. In fact, you might make it more difficult to actually enforce against. I appreciate it's standard practice at certain councils, but at others it isn't. So it's down to interpretation. If it's something that you want in we can certainly put it in. I would personally advise against it because it's already enshrined in the Environmental Protection Act.
Okay, thank you for that, Mitch. I will go with your expertise and not add the clause. Thank you very much.
Are there any other questions, members? For the purposes of debate, I move the recommendation. Councillor Huntman, as Vice Chair, will you second the motion?
Yes, Chairman, I second that.
Thank you very much. For the purposes of debate, so would anyone like to speak? Councillor Savage.
Just really on the basis of the orientation of that property and the extra space that families need in this modern age. You know, myself have experienced, you know, numerous times residents coming to me saying that they want to extend their house rather than having to move because their families are growing. You know, I personally don't see any problem with this application whatsoever, and in light of the evidence that Councillor Liz just got in terms of the fact that this would have been approved if this hadn't been a council employee, I see absolutely no reason why we shouldn't approve this application. Thank you.
Would anyone else like to speak? Councillor Cortez.
No, very quickly, just going on from what my colleague has just said, I don't think that the applicant should have the fact that she works for the council go against her, whereas if she didn't work for the council, it would have just been passed.
Yes, it's just for reasons of transparency. Obviously, that applies to members as well as employees of the council. Would anyone else like to speak? Okay. Members, the motion before you is to agree that planning permission be granted, subject to the planning conditions set out in Appendix 1. May I have a show of hands, please? Those for the motion. And that is unanimous. Permission is granted. That concludes the business for this evening. The meeting closed at 19:47. The live stream can now be stopped, please. Thank you very much indeed.